right back to researching. This is saying only 1% of your weight. Maybe they don't mean at the equator though. Pendulum clocks will respond differently, so at the poles or at the equator.
I'm Josh Clark, and this is Brain Stuff, and I'm here to answer a very pressing question. Have you ever been standing at the edge of the water, say like an ocean, and looked out on the horizon and said, I wonder exactly how far away that horizon is? You know, where the sky meets the sea, that's the horizon. Well, it turns out because the Earth is curved, that it depends on where you're standing and how far above water you're standing. Let's say that you are in the water, right? And you're up to, say, your eyes are about 8 inches above the water surface. Well, again, remember the Earth is curved. And despite the ocean seeming flat, they actually curve themselves, which if you ever really look at the horizon, it kind of goes like this a little bit, which is pretty cool. But it also goes like this, right? So if your eyes are 8 inches above the water, right, then you're about a mile away from that horizon point where the sky meets the ocean as far as you can tell. If you're standing up above water, you're like I'm about 6 feet tall. That means your eyes are about 5.5 feet above the water's edge, which means that you're about 3 miles away from the horizon. Isn't that amazing? Going from 8 inches above water, 5.5 feet above water is the distance between 2 miles between you and the horizon. Mind-blowing, if you ask me. If you like this video, there's plenty more where it came from. You can subscribe to us on this YouTube channel. You can like us. You can just spend the rest of your life watching Brain Stuff videos. Have fun.
Some say life is a roller coaster. What if it was more like this? We don't know it's spinning now, so what would life be like if it spun a little faster? Would we all just get really, really dizzy? How would we cope with short days and less sleep? How would it affect our climate or geography? If this is modern life, can we survive any faster? This is what if, and here's what would happen if the Earth spun twice as fast. We don't feel the Earth spinning because along with everything else on this planet, we're spinning right along with it. At the equator, the world turns at roughly 1,600 kilometers per hour, completing a full rotation in 24 hours. So if you sit on the equator, you would travel about 40,000 kilometers in one day. Spinning twice as fast, you lose half your day. Time would fly, but you wouldn't be having any fun. Let's start with good news. Weight loss. That's right. If the world spun twice as fast, you'd weigh a lot less. All day, every day, centrifugal force from the Earth's rotation threatens to shake you off the planet. Luckily, gravity is stronger and keeps you grounded. Still, at the equator, you weigh about half kilogram less because more centrifugal force is generated where the Earth is spinning faster, which ever so slightly decreases gravity's hold on you. So double the speed of Earth's spin, and we're all going to get looser. That is because things are about to get a lot worse. Think all your favorite TV shows and try to return to the fact that you'll never catch the next episode. Most of our satellites that are used for communications, military intelligence, and television broadcasting are synchronized to the Earth's rotation. Even the smallest increase of speed would cause them to spin out of orbit. But who's even got time for TV these days when days are only half as long? Do you think you function on 4 hours of sleep instead of 8? Would cause them to spin out of orbit. But who's even got time for TV these days when days are only half as long?
Causing them to spin in orbit.
Do you think you function on 4 hours of sleep instead of 8? How? That is because things are about to get a lot worse. Think all your favorite TV shows and try to return to the fact that you'll never catch the next episode. Most of our satellites that are used for communications, military intelligence, and television broadcasting are synchronized to the Earth's rotation. Even the smallest increase of speed would cause them to spin out of orbit.
Synchronized to the Earth's rotation. Interesting.
But who's even got time for TV these days when days are only half as long? Do you think you function on 4 hours of sleep instead of 8? How about 1 or 2 meals a day instead of 3? Humans would have to design new schedules and new calendars because instead of 365 days a year, there would now be 730. Hopefully, there'd be twice as many holidays as well. Adjusting to a new biological clock would be tough, and not everyone would make it. For example, nocturnal species would have fewer hunting hours, and they face extinction if they couldn't adapt. But humans would be becoming more efficient too, especially in terms of energy. For the average person who drives to work, they would now have to commute twice as often, doubling fuel consumption and its effect on our climate. But really, the climate would be beyond saving. For starters, extreme weather would be much more, well, extreme. Due to the curvature of the Earth, wind and water curve too as they travel across Earth's surface. This is the Coriolis effect, and it's the phenomenon that gives hurricanes their spin. So the faster the rotation of the Earth, the more the winds curve, the more hurricanes spin, and the more energy they carry with them. Put simply, deadly or disastrous. But if you like to think of yourself as a storm chaser, then hopefully you're a strong swimmer too. With the Earth spinning at 3,200 kilometers per hour, the centrifugal force would essentially pull all the water from the northern and southern hemispheres towards the equator. Countries like Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, Kenya, Indonesia, Singapore, and Australia would be partially, if not completely, submerged. On top of this, reduced gravity in the equatorial region would produce more moisture. A rim of dense fog and constant rain would permanently cover the Earth's waistline. So the next time you have a long day, be glad it wasn't shorter. Our way of life depends on it. Live in the moment, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. On top of this, reduced gravity in the equatorial region would produce more moisture. A rim of dense fog and constant rain would permanently cover the Earth's waistline. So the next time you have a long day, be glad it wasn't shorter. Our way of life depends on it. Live in the moment, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Like you, my days can be pretty stressful. The constant
While booking my Asian getaway, my plane seems to be making a detour over Alaska.
Why is my plane going out of its way to avoid the Pacific Ocean? Is this a mistake? Did I accidentally sign up for the Caribou route? At first, you might think this was a safety issue. The Pacific is the largest and deepest of the world's oceans. If a plane encounters a problem over a seemingly endless and bottomless pond of water, the pilots are going to have a rough time finding a safe spot to set her down. Alaska might not be overpopulated with international airports, but it's a lot better than the middle of the ocean. How's that for a tourism slogan? Alaska. At least it's better than sinking. Okay, I apologize, Alaska. Guessing that it was a safety precaution wouldn't be entirely wrong. When planning a route, many pilots prefer to maximize the number of airports along their path. Emergencies are incredibly rare relative to how many planes take to the skies every day. But I can't think of many things more stressful than losing an engine 30,000 feet over the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That said, it isn't the main reason airlines tend to avoid making a straight shot east to west. Ultimately, it comes down to saving fuel and time. It's easy to forget that an airline is a business whose profits depend on how quickly and cheaply it can move passengers between destinations. People also prefer to get to their next stop as quickly as possible, so it's a win-win for both airlines and passengers. Long story short, which is not my forte, speed is usually the primary factor in determining a plane's flight path, excluding special circumstances such as passing through the jet streams or other meteorological concerns. The fastest route is almost always the one closest to a straight line. But wait, just look at that flight path. It's anything but a straight line. Well, yeah, when you look at it on a flat map. But our planet isn't flat now, is it? It can be confusing since we're used to looking at our world on a two-dimensional plane. Unless you bust out a globe each time you need to check where some city or country is located, you probably look at a world map. So, on a 2D map, making a giant rainbow to avoid the Pacific Ocean looks like a much longer route. But since the Earth is a sphere, more or less, but more on that later, a straight line is going to look very different in three-dimensional spaces. Okay, let's do a little experiment. Got a globe nearby? Oh yeah, I just said most of us use Google Maps. Alright, here, I'll show you on mine. I put one end of a string on Los Angeles and the other end on Tokyo. When I pull it tight, you'll notice that the string isn't running exactly parallel to the lines of latitude printed on the globe. Instead, it'll bend slightly upwards as it follows the curvature of this mini Earth I got at the bookstore down the road. This effect is even more pronounced in practice because my globe isn't a perfect recreation of the real Leo. In fact, the problem is that it's too perfect. You see, unlike a globe, the Earth isn't a perfect sphere. Our planet is slightly bigger around the middle, kind of like me after the holidays. Wait, who wrote that? We're looking at pictures taken from outer space. The difference isn't enough to notice. The planet is so big that it's easy to lose track of a few hundred miles here and there. But check it out. If you take a giant string and measure the Earth's circumference through the poles, you need 24,860 miles of string. But if you do the same at the equator, it would jump to 24,900 miles. Why is that, you ask? Well, it's because our planet rotates on its axis. Ever spin yourself really fast on the playground merry-go-round when you were a kid? Remember feeling like the thing was going to throw you out to the sides? Actually, I remember I was throwing up a lot. Not a good ride for me. Anyway, something similar happens to the Earth's midsection as it spins. The force causes it to bulge out. Yes, it's spinning fast enough to do that. Anybody tuning in from the equator right now, you're currently moving about 1,000 miles per hour. That 40-mile difference in the Earth's width might not seem like very much, but when it comes to the surface area of an entire planet, that little bit of added girth can go a long way. The combination of these two factors, the curvature of the Earth and its extra equatorial width, ooh, I like that, meaning that curving toward the poles is a shorter distance than flying would seem like on a map straight across. None of this is to say that planes never cross the Pacific Ocean. People have to get to Australia somehow, I guess. I'm not so much into giant insects and spiders, but hey, to each his own. Just kidding, Australia. Anyway, planes will also venture over open water to avoid storms. While aircraft can outclimb some types of severe weather, such as hurricanes and tropical storms, seemingly mundane thunderstorms are surprisingly challenging. With clouds reaching altitudes of over 60,000 feet, airplanes are advised to steer around instead of into or over them. It's almost unheard of for modern aircraft to be brought down by severe weather. But bad enough turbulence can cause injuries to passengers and crew if they, and all the stuff they pack with them, get tossed around the cabin. The takeaway here is keep your seatbelts fastened at all times. Another reason planes will sometimes brave an oceanic voyage is to take advantage of the smoother ride. Even in clear weather, there's much less turbulence over water than over land. This is because the primary source of turbulence is hot air rising up from the ground. Hey, there's a lot of hot air rising up from this microphone. Water distributes heat a lot better than soil, so flights over the ocean are often much smoother. The other primary consideration for determining flight paths are air currents, namely the jet streams. These high-altitude air currents exist near the top of the troposphere. That's the lowest layer of the Earth's atmosphere, and the one where most weather occurs. The border between the troposphere and the next layer up, the stratosphere, is known as the tropopause. Its altitude fluctuates between 4 and 12 miles above the Earth's surface. This fluctuation results in rapid shifts in air temperature and pressure, which creates a wind tunnel that can reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour. These extreme speeds are most common in winter, when the temperature difference is greatest, but regular wind speeds of 80 to 140 miles per hour are nothing to scoff at, so keep your scoffing to yourself. There are 4 main jet streams, 2 in each hemisphere, and thanks to the Earth's rotation, they mostly flow west to east. The 2 most important for air travel are the polar jet stream, which forms near the Arctic Circle, and the subtropical jet stream near the equator. Both are thousands of miles long, despite being only a few miles wide. Flying with a jet stream can shave several hours off of a trip, but flying into it can slow the plane down considerably. It's also worth noting the risks associated with jet streams. The biggest hazard is a kind of turbulence known as clear air turbulence, which occurs along the edges of the streams. This kind of turbulence is nearly impossible to predict, and far more intense than the usual variety. Turbulence-related accidents are rare, but they are possible. One particular serious incident happened in 1997, when a plane flying from Tokyo to Honolulu suddenly dropped after hitting a patch of clear air turbulence. The pilots were able to regain control, but many passengers had been thrown from their seats really hard by the sudden descent. With that danger in mind, flight plans need to be carefully calculated to take advantage of the jet streams without putting the plane at risk. Repeat after me, keep your seatbelts on at all times while flying. Understanding why planes take the routes they do often comes down to facts that we don't usually think about in everyday life. The jet stream mostly affects things tens of thousands of feet in the air, and the curvature of the Earth doesn't really matter unless you travel hundreds of miles per hour over vast distances. I don't know about you, but my car can't quite manage either of those things. At least not yet. I have a few ideas, but we'll save that for a video titled 7 Things You Shouldn't Strap Rockets To.
I don't know, I didn't really quite get that
If a
one.
plane encounters a problem,
I thought he was gonna make it a little bit more obvious with, because the Earth is curved, it's better to not go straight. We'll see.
miles per hour. That 40-mile difference in the Earth's width might not seem like very much, but when it comes to
this was subscriber for sex videos. That's what that was about. I don't know why it says Marion Salas. So I got the porn again, or like, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 porn things. Clearly commented.
Hey, it's Monday. Welcome back to my channel again for the first time. We're doing a little pre-show before Ranking Fire and the fish show in a little bit, and we're going to drop over to UK's Discord server. So come along with me. Alright, yeah, a quick little intro. I'm here now.
It says I'm behind, but one person watching mine.
I didn't run my fire explosion thing, but that's cool. I can run that.
Do you have to have our own intro as well, right?
I actually pay money for mine, believe it or not. I don't pay money for anything. I pay money for that.
Moving on up.
Yeah. After my fee was there was yeah, so are you on yet?
Yeah, I'm up, ready.
Yeah. A lot of things that people don't know, that you did put that information out there about the fatty hairs, and I've had some curiosity about that, and we were gonna head over there and ranking a little while, try to reach out to some folks, see if they want to come over there and talk. So
You joke with Paula, your colleague.
oh, there you go.
Yes, yeah. That's what I was going to say. We are calling them all out tonight. Oh, I'm asking them as well. I just heard from something.
I'm not saying there at the end of
What Jerry said, meaningless.
Yeah.
He's right about that. Meaningless.
Yeah, except we're liars and the memory. Yeah, it's not gonna say anything of substance. But anyway, we can give it ratings here within the hour if you want to come over there and learn something.
Well, if you've got any questions about the test or any proof that you've got of any of your globe model predictions, that any that's been proved or anything.
Yeah.
I'd say we've got plenty of proofs, logical, geometrical, and practical proofs, with methods for practical proofs. That should, if they can show us a method, I mean, I'll find that.
About 6 a.m. there, I think.
But it's actually within the book.
Yeah, that's great. That means a lot when you're surveying with a horizontal instrument, creating a horizontal line of sight. So you say 2 lines can share a common line of sight.
Yeah, that's what we see. It seemed like he was getting any.
Right now, the Earth's surface is spinning at several hundred meters per second, and we're all along for the ride. It doesn't actually feel like you're moving, though, which is nice, because being super busy all the time doesn't sound like a fun way to live. But that also means that for a long time, we didn't know for sure that the Earth was spinning at all. People have suspected the Earth rotates for thousands of years, but it wasn't like they could just go to space and see for themselves, so it was hard to prove in a simple, clear way. Until 1851, when French physicist Leon Foucault hung a pendulum from one of the highest ceilings in Paris and let it swing. Before this, some astronomers as far back as ancient Greeks thought the Earth rotated because that would explain why the sun and other stars moved across the sky. But not everyone accepted that. Most people believe that stars were attached to some kind of celestial sphere that spun around us. And it probably didn't help that some of the ideas about what caused the Earth to rotate were a bit off. Take final laws of Croton. About 2,300 years ago, he suggested the Earth rotated because it had a twin planet that no one in Greece ever saw. Supposedly, Earth and this mysterious counter-Earth spun around each other, always facing opposite directions, at least from the Greeks' perspective. Even back then, it wasn't exactly a popular idea. Over the next few thousand years, astronomers in Europe, India, and the Middle East also looked at moving stars and suggested the Earth rotated, but none of them could prove it. Finally, in 1651, an Italian physicist named Giovanni Battista Riccioli had an idea. He wrote that if the Earth rotated, a cannonball shot due north should curve to the right. It sounds like a weird way to explain the Earth's rotation, but Riccioli was on the right track. If you did fire a cannonball north, it would curve to the right, because of what we now call the Coriolis effect. Although it wasn't named that until 200 years later. The Coriolis effect says that something moving in the northern hemisphere will look like it's being pushed to the right, and something moving in the southern hemisphere will look like it's being pushed to the left. Part of the reason for the Coriolis effect comes from the fact that the closer you get to the equator, the faster the Earth's surface rotates. That's because the planet is whitest at the equator, so you have to travel farther to get all the way around it than you do closer to the poles. But it takes one day for the Earth to finish one rotation no matter where you are. Between the surface closer to the equator has to travel farther in the same amount of time, so it moves faster. Say you're standing at the equator and fire a cannonball north. The ball zooms north, but at the same time, it's still moving east with the speed of the Earth's rotation at the equator where it left the cannon. That means that as it moves north, it's moving east faster than the Earth's surface. From your perspective, standing next to the cannon, it looks like it's moving to the right. Unfortunately, or maybe luckily, physicists at the time didn't have much access to cannons. Besides, it would be tough to track the path of the cannonball and see if it curved. So scientists decided to try something easier. They dropped balls off the top of the tallest towers they could find. The top of the tower would be moving faster than the bottom for the same reason the Earth's surface of the equator moves faster than it does near the poles. To rotate once, the top of the tower has to travel into the surface. So if the Earth didn't rotate, the balls should drop straight down. But if it did, the balls should land off to the side because the top of the tower is spinning faster than the ground. One physicist, Giovanni Battista Riccioli, found that if you drop a ball off a tower about 74 meters tall, it would land around a centimeter to the side. It was just a small difference, and it was hard to know if the measurements were accurate. But it was encouraging evidence that the Earth rotated. Now, by the mid-1800s, most people did believe the Earth rotated because they finally accepted that Earth orbits the sun. A rotating Earth was the best explanation for why the sun and stars move across the sky. And they had some evidence for it, like from watching watching how stars move relative to each other. But it was still hard to prove in a clear, easy to see way until Leon Foucault. In 1851, Foucault found a proof that could easily be repeated and didn't require any tall towers. He hung a pendulum from a string and let it swing. Since the pendulum is just hanging from the ceiling on a string, Earth's rotation can't force it to swivel. The ceiling it's attached to is rotating, but the string stays put while the ceiling turns around it. So once Foucault started the pendulum swinging, it just kept moving back and forth. But in the meantime, Earth kept rotating underneath it. From the perspective of someone standing on the ground, it looked like the pendulum swing was turning clockwise. That was the Coriolis effect in action. The pendulum swing didn't turn by much, but as time passed and the Earth kept rotating, its orientation changed more and more. Foucault first tested the pendulum in his basement, and then in the Paris Observatory of fellow scientists. And it worked. Then he hung a 67-meter pendulum from the dome of Paris' Pantheon, a mausoleum for the greatest French thinkers, and showed it off to the public. For the first time, people could see a simple demonstration of Earth's rotation with their own eyes. Still, watching swinging pendulums is something you want to do for hours, so to help him out, Foucault placed the pendulum over a bed of sand. As the pendulum swung, the tip traced out a line in the sand, and over time, the line showed the pendulum was no longer swinging in the same direction. You can find Foucault's pendulums in science museums all over the world, and even though they might seem like just a cool party trick now that we can see Earth rotating in space, they were really important for helping us understand how our planet works. The only people who weren't excited about Foucault's discovery were the scientific elite, who were annoyed by his lack of traditional scientific training. Unfortunately for them, that didn't change the fact that Foucault created the first simple, clear proof that the Earth rotated. Or maybe they were just mad that they didn't think of it first. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow. If you'd like to learn more about the Coriolis effect, you can watch our episode about how it might not mean what you think it is.
Alright guys, I'm in my super sick car and I'm at my super sick mansion and then, oh wait, I'm in an alley in Pittsburgh getting out of my Volkswagen Golf.
Hey, Australian people, have you ever been around history? Have you ever noticed where no. Just at the diameter of the Earth, the equator at 40,076 kilometers is so much greater than it is the poles at 0 block. Our planet spinning around 1.24 hours isn't big enough deal to affect toilet takes 5 seconds to flush. Basically, the direction water drains it.
Right now, the Earth's surface is spinning at several hundred meters per second, and we're all along.
After 30 days, I could not believe my before and after picture. I literally rolled back the hands of time 10 years. When I first saw this product, I thought,
spins once per day, which means that if you live at the equator, the surface of the Earth with you on it is moving around 1,000 miles per hour to the east, relative to the center of the Earth. Even at 45 degrees latitude, the Earth's surface is moving 700 miles per hour to the east, so it kind of seems like it should be faster for airplanes to fly west. I mean, their destination is literally spinning towards them. At the same time, however, they're spinning away from their destination. When we say the Earth is going 1,000 miles per hour to the east, that means that the ground and airplanes on the ground and even the air above the ground are all also moving 1,000 miles per hour to the east. For an airplane to get anywhere, it has to start moving relative to the ground and through the air at something like 100 or so miles per hour. So when it flies east, it's actually moving 1,000 plus 100 miles an hour to the east. And when it flies west, it's actually moving 1,000 minus 100 miles an hour to the east. Yes, to go west, you go east, just slower than the Earth is going east. Unless you're within 10 or so miles of the poles, in which case a brisk westward walk will take you legitimately west. That said, planes do often take different amounts of time to fly the same route in different directions, because of winds in the upper atmosphere like the jet stream that they either have at their tail or have to fly into. The prevailing direction of these winds is largely caused by the Coriolis effect, which is caused by the fact that different parts of the Earth are moving east at different speeds, which happens because the Earth is round and spinning. So airplane travel times are influenced by the rotation of the Earth, just not in a straightforward way. This video is supported by Audible.com, the leading provider of audiobooks across all types of literature, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals. If you go to audible.com/minutephysics, you can try Audible free for 30 days. I highly recommend the book K2 by Ed Vistures and David Roberts about climbing the second highest mountain on Earth and all the human drama, the successes and failures that have unfolded on its slopes. Again, you can get a free 30-day trial of Audible at audible.com/minutephysics, and thanks to Audible for supporting Minute Physics.
Ever met a person who hasn't ever heard the story of Titanic? Unlikely. Even if you ask a 10-year-old, they'll tell you exactly what took down the gigantic ship. However, some survivors of the sinking legend would beg to differ. Here's one of their stories, and surprise, it has nothing to do with an iceberg. Armenian publicist Vodkanov Bayuri was 25 years old in the spring of 1912. He described what happened on his journey to America on the most famous ship in the world in his memoirs. Quick history quiz. Do you remember when the Titanic left the Southampton dock? Did I hear April 10th, 1912? Yeah, that's right. Now, back to the story. In 1912, Vodkanov published some books together with his father, a famous Armenian writer. His task was to take the books to America. He had some health problems, so he was denied at the consulate at first, but he got the papers he needed to enter the U.S. After his father pulled some strings for him. Vodkanov caught the legendary Orient Express from Istanbul to The Hague, and from there, he made it to Southampton. He learned that the nearest ship departing for the New World was the Titanic, which everyone was talking about. He was pretty excited about the journey, and arrived at the port neatly shaven and smartly dressed, with a trendy cap and massive glasses that were popular in the U.S. at that time. The writer met three men with whom he shared cabin 804. They were two Englishmen and a French guy from Alsace named Morin. Because Morin and Vodkanov were around the same age, and Vodkanov could speak excellent French, they quickly became friends. They would hang out on the deck, at the onboard saloon, the bar, and the library. None of them could possibly imagine what would become of the unsinkable ship just days later. They went to bed rather late on April 14th, just like on the other nights. Shortly after midnight, something that sounded like a big explosion woke everyone up. Bam! The night lights went out, and the Englishmen were jerked from their bunks by a strong push. One of them injured his head, and another one his arm. The two new friends helped them up, took a few belongings with them, and left the cabin, not knowing that they would never step back in it. Vodkanov only took his passport and all the cash he had, about $54. It was clear that something was wrong, yet it was quiet in the corridor. The young men tried to find out what was going on. None of the crew members wanted to say anything, but a few minutes later, it was impossible to deny that the Titanic was going underwater. Vodkanov noticed the sailors were getting the lifeboats out, and demanded they were only for women and kids. Some men tried to sneak in anyway, but gunshots were fired off to prevent them from doing so. Vodkanov and Morin looked at each other, understanding they had two choices: stay on the sinking ship and say goodbye to their futures, or at least try to save themselves by jumping in the water. Both wanted to live, and both knew they could swim well, so the choice was obvious. Morin managed to get them two life vests. Vodkanov put his passport and money in a little bag and tied it around his neck. The Titanic's bow was already underwater by that time. It must have taken them real courage. Imagine you're in the middle of the high seas on a sinking ship, and you know no one will save you right away. A lot of people in this situation wouldn't have dared to take it to the open water. So Vodkanov and Morin jumped, and got instantly separated by a sudden wave. It only made things worse, because braving this catastrophe with a friend was one thing, but doing it alone was way scarier. The water in the North Atlantic that night was just below freezing, at a scary 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The young writer felt his arms and legs go numb, and he was understandably getting weaker and weaker every second. He lost a life vest, and now his only hope for survival was a lifeboat. He was about to faint, and it wasn't getting any warmer in the water. Just then, he bumped into something. It was a lifeboat, but if you're hoping for a happy end at this point, I'll have to disappoint you. The boat was so overcrowded, they pushed the young man with a paddle when he tried to stick to the boat. He begged for help, but they refused to show mercy. Their logic was simple. One extra man in that boat could have made it sink, and no one in it would have had a chance for survival. He had to let go of the boat, and what happened after is a miracle.
Starting out with any new project management software usually feels something like this. What do you need?
Vodkanov woke up alive on board another ship. That ship was the Carpathia, and it was en route to New York with lucky survivors on board. The writer had a terrible headache, and he saw double, but what mattered most is that he escaped from the freezing ocean. How did he do it? He couldn't remember anything. The next evening, the ship made it to New York. Without his passport and money, which he must have lost at some point during the rescue, Vodkanov was taken to the hospital. 12 days later, a woman came into the room, and all she could say through tears was, "Oh, my dear boy." She turned out to be the person who saved Vodkanov. Mrs. Astor was in her 50s, and she told the young man the lifeboat he tried to get into didn't actually leave without him. Mrs. Astor told the sailors that the young man was her son, and she wouldn't let them go without him, since she'd already lost her husband on the Titanic. It turned out she kept Vodkanov's passport and money, and invited him to visit her when he felt better. After he recovered, the writer was reunited with his family in Boston. He even received all the books he planned to sell in America, since they were traveling on a different ship. Vodkanov lived a long and happy life, and as a great storyteller, he shared what happened to him many times. Interestingly, he's never mentioned an iceberg hitting the Titanic, and always spoke about an explosion. If what he said was true, something must have caused that huge explosion. It could have been a fire, and quite a lot of people actually believe that theory, saying that coal was burning in the ship's hull. That fire would have started long before the ship's departure, and there was simply no way to put it out. Titanic must have left with the fire still ongoing, and flames eating the hull so much it couldn't survive its meeting with the iceberg. Supporters of this theory use pictures of the Titanic leaving the docks for evidence, pointing to a huge dark mark on the hull. Even if that's true, though, it's still not obvious whether the fire led to an explosion, and supporters of this theory don't deny there was an iceberg. Another theory that explained the explosion claimed that there was a German U-boat involved in the sinking of the Titanic. The Armenian writer was, in fact, not the only survivor who mentioned they heard explosion sounds coming from somewhere deep in the bowels of the ship. And they also claimed they'd seen a searchlight coming from some ship shortly after Titanic had sunk. It wasn't a vessel hurrying to the rescue, so it could have actually been a submarine that surfaced to see what it had done to the legendary ship. This theory is highly unlikely, though, for several reasons. First of all, as you know, the Titanic sank in 1912, which was still a time of peace. No country in the world would dare to kill thousands of people and provoke other countries for no reason. Secondly, a U-boat from Europe couldn't have gone that far in those times, and it couldn't have been stationed in that region either. It simply wouldn't have survived there for a long time. Finally, hitting a target that's moving quickly at nighttime is still a challenge for some mariners even today, and it was basically impossible in 1912. It's hard to tell what could have made a man who survived such a tragedy remember things that did or didn't happen. Let's hope that in the future, scientists will be able to explain all the mysteries surrounding the Titanic. So, do you believe an explosion might have killed Titanic and there was no iceberg at all? Let me know down in the comments. If you learned something new today, then
Proof. You claim the Earth is flat. Positive claim with specificity. The burden of proof is yours.
In addition, Flat Earth doesn't actually claim a definitive model. We don't have all the information required to make a model.
All right. You want us to accept that the Earth is flat, even though you can't explain any of the natural phenomena that we see. Right. Oh, hang on. You do have explanations for things, but the trouble is, they all contradict each other. Over here in reality, of course, the globe, and by extension the heliocentric model, perfectly predicts everything.
Okay, so that's a shifting the burden of proof fallacy and a straw man fallacy, because no model that you try to poke holes in can actually be a genuine flat earther's position, because we don't claim a definitive model, because we don't have access to all the information required.
By your own admission then, the flat Earth has no evidence. Good start, matey, good start.
Another common fallacy that globe earthers use is a reification fallacy. So what they do is they postulate things that they consider evidence that require the presupposition that the Earth is a ball.
Oh, here we go. Examples?
They also do this with gravity. They reify gravity. So that's a reification fallacy. Those are the three major ones, if you ever try to debate a globe earther, that they're going to pull out. The shifting the burden of proof fallacy, a straw man fallacy, and a reification fallacy.
Right, okay. Let's keep all of that in mind as we continue to review his video.
What's up, Karen? Karen B is a legend. Go sub to Karen B on YouTube.
No thanks.
So, here's the deal. Axial rotation has never been substantiated. They tell us that we're spinning around 1,040 miles per hour east, but it's never been substantiated.
We substantiate it every day when we see the sun rise and set. And very recently, a giant underground motion sensor has detected Earth's spin and tilt. ROMI uses extremely accurate laser beams travelling in opposite directions around triangular piping that become stretched and squashed by incredibly small amounts. The mismatch between the wavelengths of the lasers reveals the speed and tilt of Earth's rotation. I'd like to see you explain those results away.
Globe Earth has got Foucault's pendulum. It doesn't have an independent frame of reference. It isn't consistent. It has a window of error, and it doesn't correlate cause and effect. Science is the correlation of cause and effect. So what that means is you have an observable phenomena that is the effect. Okay, you have to correlate the cause to the effect, which means you have to have an independent variable that is manipulated so that it differentiates the effect.
Someone's been listening to Nathan Oakley. You can't hijack the meaning of science to suit your own agenda. The Oxford English Dictionary defines science as the following: knowledge about the structure and behaviour of the natural and physical world, based on facts that you can prove, for example, by experiments. My 5-year-old...
This is a tomato. Think it's good for you? Think again.
Old son the other day collected worms and snails and put them in a bucket and then put a load of different vegetation in there to see which ones they would eat. That is science. The countless videos on the internet of people putting Mentos in Diet Coke. That is science. NASA having a giant telescope that's orbiting Earth taking pictures of deep space. That is science.
And then you can validate that that is the cause. Okay, that's what the actual scientific method is. Yeah, you have the dependent variable, the effect, the observable phenomenon. You have an independent variable that you manipulate to validate the effects, okay? To validate that it is the cause of the effect. It's very simple. The globe Earth doesn't do this ever at all, so there's literally not one single piece of scientific evidence for the globe Earth.
Well, you think that based on your own warped definition of what science is. Hardly conclusive, is it?
So very simply, Foucault's pendulum doesn't prove axial rotation because, again, it doesn't have an independent frame of reference, an inertial frame of reference. It's still connected to the Earth. It doesn't have an independent frame of reference. And it has a window of error, it isn't consistent, and it doesn't correlate the cause and the effect. So it is not in any way valid postulation for evidence of the globe Earth spinning.
Yet you can use one to figure out almost your exact latitude on the planet. If the Earth was flat and motionless, could you do that? Or would the pendulum swing be more random?
Okay, they'll bring up a gyroscope, incredibly inconsistent. You do not get 15 degrees of precession every time that you make a reading with a gyroscope.
Bob did.
A 15-degree-per-hour drift.
Thanks, Bob. Twice.
So the next thing that we set out to do was to encase the fiber optic gyro in what's called a zero Gauss chamber to see if we could actually shield the energies being generated by the heaven, and we were unsuccessful with that, unfortunately.
And again, you can't just cherry pick when it does work. For one, and again, we have the same problem. It doesn't correlate the cause to the effect. Imposed causalities, claimed causalities, are just that, they're claims. You have to validate them, okay? So we were all indoctrinated and told that we lived on this tiny speck of dust that's spinning and shooting through space in this ever-expanding universe. And it was brought to you by Jesuits, the Vatican Church, literally, okay? And also a Jesuit priest came up with the Big Bang Theory.
Actually, Edwin Hubble was the man who first discovered that space was expanding. He was raised a Christian, but ended up having little or no religious beliefs.
So, one of the most corrupt establishments ever, if not the most corrupt establishment ever, brought you this fairy tale story that you evolved from apes and that you're on a tiny speck of dust and there has no evidence. So we've established axial rotation literally has no evidence. And globe will bring up Foucault's pendulum, which is from 1851, and then like 70 years later, in 1922, Einstein said, I've come to the conclusion that, you know, the movement of Earth will never be detected or can never be detected with observable phenomena or optical phenomena. So it's pretty crazy. Like one of the little leaders of their religion that they prop up, the incestuous scrabbler known as Albert Einstein, himself knew Foucault's pendulum wasn't a sufficient postulation to substantiate axial rotation.
God, you must be tired W.I.S.E gets it from all that quote mining. Interesting that you omitted the later part of the sentence of that quote. Here is the full sentence for context. Oh look, the omitted part there says, though the Earth is revolving around the sun. Naughty, naughty, W.I.S.E.
So it's a clown roll whenever the Globers just regurgitate that because they heard somebody like Muktoon or Quite the Tight Shirt say it and they don't know what they're talking about, they just regurgitate things. Okay, so there's tons of evidence. Traditional Glober, no specificity. Feel free to provide some actual evidence. And maybe you should listen. Okay, so axial rotation has never been substantiated, literally. It makes a claim of curvature. Inherently, if it's a ball, it's going to curve, right? So what we did was we went out and tested the claim of curvature. We have long distance observations that are literal impossibilities on the globe Earth.
All of which have been debunked or explained.
We have observations of 273 miles, The Black Swan was done from 1 foot observer height. The geometric horizon should be at 1.2 feet. In the circulation of the mean, we gave you 5 feet. That means the geometric horizon, the physical, literal, tangible piece of land that should cause obstruction of view, can be no further than 2.73 miles. This isn't a debatable number, okay? This is necessitated by the geometry of the earth that they told you that you live on, because you take the radius times 1.225 of the observer height and you get the geometric horizon. We tested it. We saw that the horizon was beyond the oil rig that was at 9.42 miles, and it couldn't be any farther than 2.73 miles, a literal impossibility on the globe Earth.
The Black Swan has also been thoroughly debunked many times.
Again, we have long distance observations everywhere, all the time, 50 miles, 60 miles, 200 miles, missing a mile of curvature. A mile of curvature. We have observations where there should be a mile of the earth blocking our view and there's no curvature there. Really take that in. Okay, and of course, Globers have been indoctrinated and trained to just regurgitate the word refraction. Void of specificity, there's 5 effects of refraction. They don't even know that. They don't actually even invoke a specific one that's relative to the postulation. They also don't seem to understand the concepts that looming, for example, is a phenomenon relative to the horizon. Objects loom relative to the horizon. We're discussing the movement of the horizon. They don't understand the idea of empirical means, verification, experimentation, replication to actually verify their postulations. It's a clown world. Okay, it's pathetic. It is so pathetic, honestly.
Wow, he went a bit word salad there, didn't he? W.I.S.E Gets Its video goes on for another half an hour. So we're going to return next month and have a little look at that section of his video. He won't be going anywhere. Right, that brings this week's episode of Flat Earth Friday to a very satisfying close. Thanks very much for joining me. And thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, then please do like and subscribe. It'd be thoroughly appreciated. I've been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. And I'll see you on Tuesday, where, if you can remember him, you'll be very happy to know that Hans is back. See you then.
Florida homeowners, if you have a power meter like this on the side of your house, you can get paid to go solar at no cost to you. It costs nothing to get the solar installed.
Guess what? If you're like me, now I'm going to have your taxes are going to be raised, not cut.
And it's true. The New York Times says Biden's tax increases are more than double Hillary Clinton's plan.
Your taxes are going to be raised, not cut.
The bottom line is big tax increases.